My son thought I hadn't seen him slip something strange into my wine during Christmas dinner, but I noticed every detail. When he walked away, I switched our glasses, turning his betrayal into his own trap. What happened to him next shocked me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The doorbell rang, not once, but in short, aggressive bursts that cut through the evening quiet of my living room. I set down my newspaper and glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Who visits at this hour? I opened the door to find Cecil standing on my porch, shoulders hunched against the December cold. Leona stood behind him, her arms crossed, breath visible in small puffs. Before I could speak, my son pushed past me into the house. "We need to talk." His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Leona followed, closing the door behind her with a firm click. She surveyed my living room like she was appraising it, her gaze lingering on the built-in shelves I'd crafted myself, the hardwood floors I'd laid board by board. "Cecil, what's this about?" I backed toward my recliner, suddenly feeling like a stranger in my own home. He paced near the fireplace, his business casual clothes wrinkled, his usually neat hair disheveled. "It's about this house, Dad. About you sitting on a pile of money while we live in need." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Need? But you have a good job, a nice place." "Nice place?" Leona stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Lyman, we're crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 growing kids. Madison's sleeping in the living room, for heaven's sake." Cecil whirled around, his face flushed. "Dad, we need a bigger house now, not after you're dead. The kids are growing, and we can't wait for inheritance while you hoard wealth." I gripped the back of my chair. This house represented 40 years of my life. Every nail, every piece of trim, every perfectly fitted joint, all my work. "Cecil, son, this house is my work, my memories. After I'm gone, it'll be yours. Everything will be yours." "That's not good enough." His voice cracked with desperation. "We need the money today. Sell it, Dad. Move into a retirement community. Use the equity to help your family." Leona moved closer, her tone suddenly gentle, manipulative. "Lyman, be reasonable. We need the money today. The kids need space to grow, opportunities we can't provide, living paycheck to paycheck." "Reasonable?" Heat flared in my chest. "Reasonable? I built this with my own hands for 40 years. Every board, every room. This is my life's work." Cecil's face contorted with frustration. "Your life's work is worthless if it doesn't help your family. You're being selfish, Dad. Completely selfish." The accusation stung. I'd worked at construction sites in blazing summers and bitter winters, saved every penny, built this house as a legacy for him. Now he called me selfish for wanting to live in it. "Get out!" The words came quietly, but they carried the weight of my resolve. "Both of you, get out of my house." Cecil's eyes widened, then hardened. "Fine, but this isn't over, Dad. We'll find another way." They left without another word. The front door slammed, rattling the pictures on the wall. Through the window, I watched their car pull away, taillights disappearing into the December darkness. I stood alone in my living room, legs trembling, heart pounding against my ribs. The familiar walls seemed different now, not like home, but like something under siege. 90 minutes later, I still hadn't moved from where Cecil left me standing. The silence pressed against my ears, broken only by the house settling around me. My flannel shirt clung to my back, damp with cold sweat. I sank into my recliner, the leather creaking under my weight. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. In all my years, I'd never imagined my own son would speak to me that way, would look at me with such contempt. The living room felt different. I looked around at the crown molding I'd cut and fitted myself, at the hardwood floors I'd sanded smooth. Each surface held memories of calloused hands and aching backs, of Martha bringing me coffee during weekend projects. I stood and walked to the fireplace, running my fingers along the mantel I'd carved from a single piece of oak. "I remember mixing cement in winter," I whispered to the empty room, laying each brick when the mortar kept freezing. My wedding photo sat where it always had, Martha smiling in her yellow dress. I picked up the silver frame, her face blurring as my eyes filled. Martha would have known what to do. She always did. I moved to her favorite chair by the window and sat down, still holding the photograph. Martha had possessed a gift for seeing through people's anger to their real needs. Family above all else, Lyman, she used to say. When someone lashes out, they're usually afraid. Maybe Cecil was afraid. Maybe Leona too. Living in a cramped apartment with 2 children, watching their friends buy bigger houses while they struggled, that kind of pressure could make people desperate. The thought sent me upstairs to our old bedroom. In the closet behind Martha's hanging dresses that I couldn't bear to give away, I opened the small wall. Safe. The metal door swung open with a soft click. $10,000 in neat bundles. Money I'd saved over years, setting aside 20 here, 50 there. Every dollar represented something I didn't buy, some pleasure I denied myself, a new truck when the old one still ran, dinner out when peanut butter sandwiches would do. I lifted the money, feeling its weight. 10,000 wasn't the house money Cecil wanted, but it was real help. It could cover a down payment, give them a fresh start. It was love in tangible form. The bills felt crisp between my fingers as I counted them again. Tomorrow morning, I'd call Cecil. I'd apologize for losing my temper and offer him this gift. Maybe then he'd understand that I wasn't his enemy. I was his father, trying to help the only way I knew how. I returned the money to the safe, but left it unlocked. Tomorrow would bring reconciliation. Tomorrow, my son would remember that family came first. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with fresh coffee and yesterday's newspaper folded beside me. Sunlight streamed through the frost-edged window, casting familiar patterns across the oak surface I'd built and installed myself 20 years ago. I'd rehearsed the words a dozen times while making breakfast. Simple, direct, loving. An apology and an offer wrapped in the hope of healing. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed Cecil's number. The phone rang twice before his voice cut through the line, sharp and impatient. "What do you want, Dad?" Not exactly a warm greeting, but I pressed on. "Son, I want to help. I've been thinking about yesterday, and you're right. Family should come first. I have $10,000 in cash. It's yours." Silence stretched between us. Then Cecil's voice exploded through the speaker, loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. 10,000? Are you kidding me right now? Is this some kind of joke? I blinked, confused by his fury. "It's all the free money I have, son. I thought it could help with the down payment." "A down payment?" His laugh was bitter, cutting. "Dad, do you have any idea what houses cost? We can't even make a decent down payment with that pathetic amount." My coffee grew cold as I gripped the phone tighter. "Cecil, please. It's everything I've saved. It's meant with love." "Love?" His voice cracked with rage. "You greedy old man. You sit on hundreds of thousands in home equity, throwing us scraps like we're beggars. This is insulting." Heat flared in my chest. "I worked for 40 years to build this house. Every penny of that money came from overtime shifts and skipped meals. And what good does it do us locked up in your precious house? We're struggling, Dad. My kids are growing up in a cramped apartment, while you hoard wealth like some miserly dragon." "Hoard?" I was shouting now, standing at my kitchen counter. "I offered you everything I have. Everything you have is this house. Sell it, Dad. Stop being selfish and help your actual living family, instead of clinging to memories of a dead woman." The words hit me like a physical blow. Martha, he'd brought Martha into this, dismissed her memory as if she meant nothing, as if our 40-year marriage was just an obstacle to his inheritance. "Don't you dare. Face reality, old man. You're going to die in that house alone, and we'll sell it anyway. Why not help us now when we need it?" The phone line went dead. I stood holding the receiver, listening to the dial tone buzz in my ear. My hand shook as I set the phone down. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing closer. Outside, a neighbor's Christmas lights blinked cheerfully, mocking the darkness that had settled over my morning. The coffee had gone stone cold. I stared at it, processing what had just happened. My son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, who'd helped me tile the bathroom when he was 12, had just revealed his true nature. He didn't want my help, he wanted my house, and he was willing to destroy our relationship to get it. An hour after hanging up, I still sat in my kitchen chair, staring at the phone like it might ring again. The coffee had gone stone cold, a thin film forming on the surface. My hands had finally stopped shaking. I pushed myself up from the table and walked slowly into the living room. My legs felt unsteady, like I'd been sick for weeks. The morning sunlight slanted through the windows I'd installed myself, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air. On the mantel sat a framed photo of Cecil at age 8, grinning with a gap-toothed smile. He'd been helping me install the kitchen cabinets that weekend, handing me screws and holding boards in place. Such small hands then, eager to help his old man build something lasting. I picked up the frame, running my thumb across the glass. 35 years ago, he'd broken his arm falling off his bike. I'd held him in this very chair while Martha called the doctor, feeling his small body shake with tears against my chest. Where had that boy gone? College tuition, $42,000. I'd worked double shifts for 3 years to pay it off. His first car when he graduated, $8,000. The wedding Leona insisted on, $15,000 more than Martha and I had spent on our entire first year of marriage. And this morning he called me a greedy old man. I set the photo back down, my jaw clenching tight. The memories kept coming, unbidden and sharp, teaching him to drive in the empty church parking lot, helping him move into his first apartment, co-signing the loan for his second car when his credit wasn't good enough. Every sacrifice, every extra hour worked, every vacation Martha and I didn't take so we could help our son build his life. And for what? So he could stand in my living room and demand I sell the house I'd built with my own hands? I paced to the window, looking out at my front yard. Mrs. Peterson across the street was already hanging Christmas lights, humming as she worked. Normal people doing normal things, not having their hearts ripped out by ungrateful children. The anger felt good, clean and sharp, cutting through the hurt like a blade. I straightened my shoulders, feeling something settle into place behind my ribs, something hard and final. I'd raised Cecil, supported him, loved him unconditionally for 42 years, and he'd thrown it back in my face for money, called me greedy for wanting to live in the house I'd spent decades building. That's it. Enough. I looked around my living room with new eyes, not as a future inheritance waiting to be divided, but as my space, the crown molding I'd cut by hand, the hardwood floors I'd sanded smooth, the built-in shelves where Martha's books still sat, exactly where she'd left them. This was mine. And if Cecil wanted nothing to do with me unless I was handing him money, then he could have exactly that. Nothing. My chest felt lighter than it had all morning. The decision sat well in my stomach, solid and sure. No more phone calls, no more attempts to help, no more disappointment when my son showed me exactly who he'd become. I glanced toward the garage where boxes of Christmas decorations sat waiting. Maybe some physical work would help burn off this restless energy. Tomorrow I'd drag out the lights and make the house look festive. Not for family, I didn't have any of that left, but for me, because I could, because it was my house. The next morning I woke before dawn and couldn't get back to sleep. By 9 o'clock I'd finished breakfast and stood in my garage, pulling dusty cardboard boxes from the shelves. Christmas decorations, 1995, read Martha's careful handwriting on the nearest one. Maybe if I decorate the house, my mood will improve. The thought felt hollow, even as I had it, but I needed something to do with my hands, something that didn't involve thinking about ungrateful sons or cruel words. The first box contained strings of icicle lights tangled into knots that would take an hour to sort. I spread them across my workbench, methodically checking each bulb for cracks or blackened filaments. The repetitive work felt therapeutic, a problem I could actually solve. By 10:30, I dragged my aluminum ladder from its hooks and positioned it against the house. At 65, climbing to hang lights along the roofline took more effort than it used to. My knees protested each step, and I had to pause twice to catch my breath. But the physical effort felt good, real. Each clip I attached to the gutter, each section of lights I tested and strung, was tangible progress. Unlike trying to maintain a relationship with someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account. Mrs. Peterson waved from her yard as I positioned the illuminated reindeer on my front lawn. "Getting an early start this year, Lyman." I managed to smile and waved back. At least my neighbors didn't expect me to sell my house and move into a retirement home. The phone started ringing at 2:30. I was untangling the last string of lights when Cecil's ringtone cut through the December air. Same melody he'd had for years, some upbeat song I'd never bothered to learn the name of. I let it ring until it stopped. 10 minutes later, it rang again. I gritted my teeth and kept working. The lights for the front bushes needed to be tested before I could plug them in. Half the strand was dead, probably from sitting in the garage all year. I'd have to dig through the spare bulb box. Third ring at 2:45. I pretended not to hear it, but my hands had started shaking again. What if something was wrong with the grandkids? Tommy had been fighting a cold last week. What if Madison had gotten hurt at school? Martha's voice whispered in my memory. Family first, Lyman. Always family first. But Martha had never heard her son call her husband a greedy old man. The fourth ring came at 2:50. I stopped working entirely, standing in my front yard with Christmas lights draped over my arm like tinsel. My chest felt tight, torn between righteous anger and grandfather's worry. What if something happened to Tommy or the little one? Martha would never forgive me if I ignored a call about the grandkids. Neither would I. I walked slowly toward the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The phone had stopped ringing, but I knew it would start again. Cecil was persistent when he wanted something. Sure enough, as I reached for the door handle, it rang again. I stood on my own doorstep, breathing hard from more than just the physical work. My hand hovered over the knob. I could let it ring. Let voicemail handle whatever Cecil had to say this time. Continue my peaceful morning of decorating and pretend I didn't have a son. But what if it really was about the kids? The ringing seemed louder inside the house. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the phone for 3 more rings before picking it up. What do you want, Cecil? Dad, forgive me. Cecil's voice came through the receiver, soft and humble, nothing like yesterday's venom. I behaved like an idiot. Leona made me call to apologize. I shifted the phone to my other ear, suspicious. The complete change in his tone set off alarms in my head. Yesterday he'd called me a greedy old man. Today he sounded like a repentant child. I don't know, son. You hurt me very badly. I know. I was awful to you. Completely awful. His voice cracked slightly, but something about it felt rehearsed. The stress of the holidays, the kids asking for things we can't afford. None of that excuses how I spoke to you. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my work clothes from decorating. Through the window I could see the half-finished light display on my front lawn. The mundane sight somehow grounded me. Stress doesn't turn you into a different person, Cecil. It just shows who you really are. Please don't say that. Now he sounded genuinely distressed. Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am. That's why I'm calling. Leona and I talked all night, and we want you to come to Christmas dinner. Christmas dinner. I rubbed my forehead with my free hand, feeling the tension that had settled there like a permanent resident. Christmas Eve, 6 o'clock, Cecil continued. Please come, Dad. The kids want to see Grandpa. Madison keeps asking when you're coming over. She's been practicing a song on her recorder to play for you. The mention of Madison hit me square in the chest. 7 years old and gap-toothed, like her father had been, always eager to show me her latest artwork or the new dance she'd learned at school. Cecil, I just don't... Tommy's been asking about you, too. He wants to show you his science project. Something about volcanoes. Cecil's voice grew warmer, more natural. They miss you, Dad. We all miss you. I found myself thinking about Christmas Eve's past. Martha would spend all day in the kitchen making her famous Christmas pudding from her grandmother's recipe. The house would smell like cinnamon and nutmeg. We'd drive to Cecil's place with the car full of presents and homemade desserts. I could bring Christmas pudding, I heard myself say. Martha's recipe. That would be perfect. Cecil's relief was palpable. The kids would love that. They always talk about Grandma Martha's cooking. I grabbed a pen and notepad from the counter. What's your address again? When Cecil rattled it off, I wrote it down carefully. And it's 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve? 6 sharp. Dad, thank you. This means everything to us. Fine. I stared at the address I'd written, second-guessing myself even as I spoke. But this is your last chance, Cecil. I won't be treated like that again. I understand. I promise things will be different. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen holding the piece of paper with Cecil's address. The numbers looked stark against the white notepad, a destination I wasn't sure I should be traveling to. Maybe people could change. Maybe stress really had made him say things he didn't mean. Maybe his apology was genuine, and Christmas Eve could be a fresh start for our relationship. Or maybe I was just a foolish old man who wanted to believe his son still loved him. I folded the paper and slipped it into my shirt pocket, right next to my heart, where it felt like both a promise and a warning. Saturday morning, December 21st, I sat at my kitchen table staring at Cecil's address on the notepad. Maybe I was too harsh. Boys sometimes say stupid things under pressure. Martha always believed people deserved second chances, especially family. The shopping center was packed with last-minute Christmas shoppers. I circled the parking lot 3 times before finding a spot near the back. Inside the toy store, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I wandered the aisles, overwhelmed by the choices. For Tommy, I selected a Lego architecture set, the kind that would challenge a 10-year-old's mind. He'd always been clever with his hands, just like his grandfather. For Madison, an art supply set with colored pencils, watercolors, and a thick sketch pad. She'd shown me her drawings last summer, detailed pictures of flowers and houses. The cashier, a college-age girl with tired eyes, smiled as she rang up the purchases. Your grandchildren are lucky to have someone who cares so much about getting the right gifts. Pride swelled in my chest. They're good kids. Sunday and Monday were for the pudding. I retrieved Martha's handwritten recipe from the kitchen drawer, where it had sat, untouched, for 3 years. Her careful cursive instructed, Day 1 for mixing, Day 2 for steaming, Day 3 for serving. At the grocery store, I gathered the traditional ingredients: beef sweet from the butcher counter, crystallized ginger, candied orange peel, and a bottle of brandy for aging. The sweat clerk looked puzzled when I asked for it. Most people use vegetable shortening nowadays. This is my wife's recipe. Some things shouldn't change. Back home, I mixed the dense batter in Martha's largest bowl, the blue ceramic one she'd received as a wedding gift. My hands followed her written instructions like a prayer. Fold in the flour gently. Don't overmix. Add the brandy last. The kitchen filled with the rich scent of spices and fruit. Monday brought the steaming process. I wrapped the pudding in cheesecloth and lowered it into Martha's old steamer pot, the one she'd used every Christmas for 40 years. Steam rose like incense, carrying memories of holidays past. Christmas Eve morning, I chose my navy suit from the bedroom closet. I hadn't worn it since Martha's funeral, but the occasion seemed to demand formality. The white shirt required careful ironing, paying special attention to the collar, the way Martha had taught me. The gifts went into brown paper bags, old-fashioned wrapping that reminded me of my own childhood. Red ribbon tied around each bag's handles completed the look, simple but dignified. By 4 o'clock, the pudding had cooled and sat wrapped in fresh cheesecloth on my kitchen counter. I studied myself in the hallway mirror, adjusting my tie until it sat straight. Martha would have approved of the effort. The drive to Cecil's neighborhood took 20 minutes through streets lined with elaborate Christmas displays. His house sat in a development of identical colonial-style homes, each with perfectly maintained lawns and matching mailboxes. The contrast to my hand-built craftsman style was stark. I parked in the driveway behind Cecil's sedan and gathered my packages from the back seat. Through the large front windows I could see warm light spilling from inside, shadows moving around a Christmas tree. Children's laughter drifted through the glass. Standing on the front porch with gifts in my arms, I heard Madison's voice inside. "Is that Grandpa's car?" My heart lightened despite my caution. Cecil opened the door with a smile broader than I'd seen in months. "Dad, right on time." He stepped aside, gesturing me into the warmth of his home. Before I could respond, Tommy and Madison burst from the living room, wrapping their arms around my waist in simultaneous hugs. "Grandpa, you came." Madison squeezed tighter, her gap-toothed grin infectious. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I brought presents." Leona appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. "Lyman, you look wonderful. Come in. Let me take your coat." Her welcome seemed genuine, warmer than our usual interactions. The house impressed me despite my reservations about modern decor. A massive Christmas tree dominated the living room corner, decorated with silver and gold ornaments that caught the light. The dining room table, visible through an archway, was set with china and crystal. "Kids, let Grandpa get settled before you attack him for presents," Cecil laughed, taking my coat to a nearby closet. I handed out the wrap bags. Watching their faces light up with each revelation, Tommy's eyes widened at the Lego set. Grandpa, this is the one I wanted. How did you know? Madison clutched her art supplies to her chest like precious treasure. Can we use these tomorrow morning, Grandpa? I want to draw you a picture. We'll see what your parents say. The joy on their faces melted away my lingering doubts about coming here tonight. I presented the Christmas pudding to Leona, who accepted it with exaggerated gratitude. Lyman, you shouldn't have gone to so much trouble. Martha's recipe, isn't it? The children will be thrilled. Cecil led me on a brief tour of their renovated dining room, pointing out the new chair rail and built-in buffet. We did most of the work ourselves, he said with pride I recognized from my own home projects. Nice craftsmanship, I admitted. The workmanship was solid, if not quite to my standards. As we gathered around the table, Leona directed me to the head chair with ceremony. This is your place tonight, Lyman, the guest of honor. The formal table setting, good china, cloth napkins, crystal glasses, reminded me of holidays with Martha. Cecil carved the turkey while Leona brought side dishes from the kitchen. Normal family sounds filled the room, silverware clinking against plates, Tommy describing his science project, Madison humming Christmas carols under her breath. Dad, I really regret that conversation we had, Cecil said during the first course, his voice carrying genuine remorse. I was completely out of line. I nodded, tasting the stuffing. Let's focus on tonight, on family. The meal progressed smoothly. Turkey carved to perfection, mashed potatoes creamy and rich, green bean casserole exactly like Martha used to make. Conversation flowed naturally between school stories, work updates, and Christmas plans. For the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my chest beginning to loosen. This was what Christmas Eve should feel like. Family gathered together, sharing food and laughter, creating memories for the grandchildren. Cecil occasionally checked his watch, but I attributed it to dinner timing. Leona moved efficiently between kitchen and dining room, every dish arriving at the perfect moment. Before we have dessert, Cecil announced, rising from his chair, I want to make a toast. He walked to the sideboard, where an expensive bottle of red wine waited. Let's drink to family with this wonderful wine. The cork popped with a satisfying sound as Cecil opened the bottle at the sideboard. This is from that vineyard in Napa we visited last summer, he told Leona, his voice carrying forced cheer. Can we have some too, Daddy? Madison asked from her seat next to me. You and Tommy can have grape juice instead, Leona replied, already rising to fetch it from the kitchen. I watched Cecil pour the dark wine into 5 glasses, arranging them carefully on a silver tray. His movements seemed precise, almost rehearsed, as he positioned each glass in a specific spot on the tray. From my angle at the head of the table, I had a clear view of his actions. Cecil glanced around the room, checking that everyone was occupied with dinner conversation, then reached into his jacket pocket. A small packet emerged, white, about the size of a sugar substitute. What was that? Sugar? No, sugar isn't hidden like that. Cecil's fingers moved quickly, tearing the packet open and dumping white powder into one specific glass. The glass positioned exactly where my place setting indicated it would go. He folded the empty packet and slipped it back into his pocket, his movements furtive and practiced. My heart began hammering against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral, continuing to cut my turkey as if I hadn't noticed anything unusual. The taste of the meal turned to ash in my mouth. Cecil, help me check the pie in the oven, Leona called from the kitchen, her timing suspiciously convenient. Of course, honey. Cecil placed the tray of wine glasses on the table, carefully aligning each glass with its intended recipient. I'll be right back, everyone. Don't start the toast without me. They disappeared into the kitchen together, leaving me alone at the table with Tommy and Madison, who continued chattering about their Christmas morning plans. The poison wine sat 18 inches from my right hand, the glass catching reflections from the chandelier overhead. My son, the boy I'd taught to hammer nails and change oil, who'd cried in my arms when he broke his bicycle, had just tried to poison me. The realization hit harder than any physical blow I'd ever taken. Every kind word tonight, every gesture of reconciliation, every moment of what I'd thought was genuine family warmth. All of it had been performance, a script designed to lure me here so they could... What? Kill me for my inheritance? Make it look like a heart attack brought on by the stress of reconciliation? The sound of Cecil and Leona returning from the kitchen snapped me back to the present moment. My hands had started trembling, but I gripped my dinner napkin to steady them. "Sorry about that," Cecil said, sliding back into his seat with that same forced smile. "The pie needed a few more minutes." He reached for his wine glass, lifting it expectantly toward me. "Now, Dad, that toast to family, to new beginnings and letting go of the past." I stared at the poisoned glass, my mind racing through options. Confront him now? Pretend to drink and see what happened? Call the police? What proof did I have beyond what I'd witnessed? Cecil's smile wavered slightly as he waited for me to pick up my glass. The room fell silent, except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner and my own thundering heartbeat. Cecil and Leona returned from the kitchen wearing expressions of poorly concealed relief. They settled back into their chairs as if nothing had happened, but I caught the meaningful glance they exchanged. "Now then," Cecil announced, lifting his wineglass with theatrical flourish. He distributed the glasses around the table, each one placed deliberately in front of its intended recipient. "To family and forgiveness." Tommy and Madison raised their juice cups with giggles, mimicking the adult toast. Cecil's face glowed with confidence as he lifted his glass toward mine, waiting for me to follow suit. I raised my glass slowly, watching his expression with interest. "To getting what we deserve." We all drank together, Cecil taking a deep, satisfied gulp, Leona sipping nervously while watching me intently for immediate effects, the children draining their juice with enthusiasm. I took only the smallest taste, just enough to wet my lips. Cecil set down his glass with a satisfied smile, checking his watch discreetly. How long had they expected their little surprise to take effect? 20 minutes? An hour? I placed my glass on the table with deliberate care and fixed my son with a steady gaze. "Cecil, what did you put in my glass?" The color drained from his face instantly. "What? Nothing. I don't understand what you mean." His voice cracked on the last word, too high and too fast. The dining room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Tommy and Madison looked between their parents and me with growing confusion. Leona's face had gone white as fresh snow, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. "Then you won't mind that I switched our glasses while you were in the kitchen?" The words hit Cecil like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly as comprehension dawned across his features. The confident mask crumbled, replaced by raw terror. "What?" The word exploded from his throat as he shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. His hands flew to his stomach, then his mouth, as if he could somehow prevent what he'd already swallowed. "What's wrong with Daddy?" Madison's small voice cut through the chaos, tears starting to form in her eyes. Cecil didn't answer. He doubled over slightly, one hand braced against the table, the other pressed to his mouth. His face had taken on a greenish pallor that would have been comical under different circumstances. "The bathroom," he gasped, stumbling toward the hallway. "I need—" He didn't finish the sentence. The sound of his footsteps pounding down the hall was followed by the bathroom door slamming shut, with enough force to rattle the pictures on the walls. Then came the retching. Violent, desperate sounds that echoed through the house, punctuated by Cecil's panicked gasps for air between waves of sickness. I remained seated at the head of the table, cutting another piece of turkey as if nothing unusual had occurred. The children had started crying now, clinging to each other while their mother stood frozen in shock. Leona's eyes darted between the hallway where her husband's suffering continued, and my serene expression. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, apparently at a loss for words. Perfect. After 42 years of being Cecil's father, I'd finally taught him a lesson he'd never forget. Leona approached me with trembling hands, her face streaked with tears that might have been genuine. "You don't understand. We needed the money." Her voice pitched higher with each word, desperation making her careless. I set down my fork and looked at her with the same expression I'd give a stranger. "You wanted to kill me for inheritance?" From the bathroom came another wave of violent retching, followed by Cecil's weak moaning. The sound made Madison sob harder, while Tommy tried awkwardly to comfort his little sister. "It was only a sleeping drug." Leona's words tumbled out in a rush. "We wanted you to change your will. Nothing permanent, just... We needed you to understand how desperate we are." "Lies," I stood slowly, my legs steady despite everything. You gave him enough to make him violently ill. If that was just a sleeping pill, you'd have crushed up a bottle. Leona's composure cracked completely. The mortgage payments are crushing us. The children need things we can't afford. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands while we struggle every month. Cecil's anguished groans echoed from the hallway, punctuating her desperate justifications. I offered you $10,000, I reminded her coldly. Your husband called me a greedy old man and hung up on me. That's nothing compared to what you have. Leona's desperation had transformed into fury, her mask finally slipping completely. You could sell that house and live anywhere. Why should you hoard wealth while your own grandchildren go without? The children were openly sobbing now, huddled together on Tommy's chair like refugees from a war zone. They'd never seen adults behave this way, never witnessed the ugly reality behind grown-up desperation. I walked to the coat closet and retrieved my jacket, moving with careful deliberation. I'm leaving, and never coming back. Wait, Leona followed me, alternating between pleading and threats. You can't just abandon them. Think about Tommy and Madison. I turned to face the children, who looked up at me with tear-stained faces and confusion in their eyes. I'm sorry you had to see this. The gifts are yours to keep. Tommy wiped his nose on his sleeve. Grandpa, why is Daddy so sick? Ask your mother. I pulled on my coat, checked that I had my car keys. She has all the answers. Leona grabbed my arm as I reached for the door handle. If you leave now, we'll tell everyone what you did. We'll call the police. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve until she released it. Tell them what? That your husband tried to poison me and accidentally poisoned himself instead? That should be an interesting conversation. The bathroom had gone quiet. Either Cecil had passed out or exhausted himself. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Tell Cecil he made his choice, I said, opening the front door. Actions have consequences. He's just learned that lesson the hard way. I walked to my car without looking back, even when I heard Leona screaming my name from the doorway. The engine turned over smoothly, reliable as always, and I drove away into the cold December night. In my rearview mirror, I could see her silhouette in the doorframe, but I didn't slow down. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Christmas morning arrived gray and quiet in my empty house. I woke to silence, made coffee in my own kitchen, and felt no regret whatsoever about the previous evening's events. Justice served cold tastes remarkably satisfying. The neighborhood showed signs of normal Christmas activity. Cars in driveways, children's voices carrying across yards, the comfortable chaos of families opening presents. I watched from my front window, content with my solitude, Martha's memory keeping me company. 3 days later, Mrs. Patterson leaned over our shared fence while I was checking my mailbox. Lyman, did you hear? Cecil's been in the hospital since Christmas Eve. Something terrible with his stomach? I arranged my features into appropriate concern. How awful. Is he recovering? Poor Leona's been there every day with the children. The doctors aren't sure what caused it. Some kind of severe food poisoning or reaction. She shook her head sympathetically. You know how these things can happen during the holidays. Rich food, too much excitement. Indeed. Please give her my regards when you see her. Mrs. Patterson studied my face carefully, perhaps hoping for more dramatic reaction to news about my son. Will you be visiting him at the hospital? I'm sure he's in good hands with the medical staff. That evening I sat in Martha's favorite chair and considered Cecil's situation. The boy had gotten a taste of his own medicine, quite literally. Whatever he'd planned to give me had obviously been stronger than Leona claimed. Sleeping pills didn't typically require hospitalization. By December 30th, I'd made my decision. The phone call to my lawyer was brief and professional. The law office smelled of leather and old books, exactly as it should. Mr. Hendricks had handled Martha's estate, and knew me as a careful, practical man who didn't make impulsive decisions. Are you certain about this decision, Mr. Sims? He reviewed the new will documents with practiced eyes. This represents a significant change from your previous arrangements. Someone who tries to poison his own father doesn't deserve inheritance, I stated flatly. The house and my savings will go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The grandchildren will receive trust funds when they turn 25, enough for college and a start in life, but not enough to make them lazy. Mr. Hendricks nodded slowly. And your son and daughter-in-law receive nothing. Nothing? They've shown their true nature. The signing ceremony was simple but satisfying. My signature across the bottom of each page felt like drawing a line under an unfortunate chapter of my life. 2 witnesses from the office signed after me, making the document legally binding. January the 2nd brought a crisp, clear morning. I returned home from the lawyer's office with a copy of my new will, which I placed in the wall, safe where the old one had lived. The thick envelope fit perfectly in the space Martha's jewelry box had once occupied. Looking around my living room, I felt profound satisfaction. The house truly belonged to me now, not as something waiting to be inherited, but as my sanctuary until the day I died. Cecil had taught me an invaluable lesson about family loyalty, though probably not the one he'd intended. Martha's photograph smiled at me from the mantel. I raised my coffee cup in a small salute. You would approve, dear. I protected what we built together. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.